Welcome to Babblecom 5. This is episode 19 of season 1 of Babylon 5, A Voice in the Wilderness, part 2. And we have a bit of a recap. And the mystery ship jumping in at the end of the last episode was an Earth Alliance heavy cruiser, the Hyperion. Captain Ellis Pierce commanding and coming to give Garibaldi some help, whether or not he actually asked for it. The Star Fury we see leaving the Hyperion is, I believe, a Badger class, from memory. It's got a sort of rear-facing cockpit, unlike the Furies we see on Babylon 5 regularly. Not sure if we ever see one again, in fact. Sinclair's rescue alien is in medbay. He's stable, but Franklin is still figuring out his biology. Pierce wants to see Sinclair. Apparently, the Office of Planetary Security ordered the Hyperion to abandon a trip to the Vegan colony and head to Babylon 5 to take control of the situation. Pierce calls the station cushy, and of course it is. His ship doesn't have gravity. Pierce makes a valid point. Babylon 5 is neutral territory, so Earth Alliance doesn't actually have an overwhelming claim on Epsilon 3 and the tech that's been discovered, so he's basically come to protect it from all comers, with one cruiser. Okay. Sinclair, however, is not impressed by his show of force, given this is a diplomatic station. He's happy for him to enjoy the station, but is going to try and make his stay as brief as possible. I'm not entirely sure who has the overriding rank in this scenario, and I don't think either of them is sure either, actually. Garibaldi is on the Zocalo, and he does not take kindly to trash talk about Marsies, and decides to see if he can make the guy's head magically disappear through the top of the bar. No luck on the first try, but he's persistent. There's talk of a more heavy-handed approach to restoring order on the Red Planet on ISN, which is what provoked the idiot's comments. Sinclair is speaking with Senator Hidoshi about the Hyperion situation, but the orders come from above his pay grade, basically. Interestingly, as I was pondering, Sinclair believes he has a presidential mandate giving him full control over Babylon 5's sector of space, meaning he could put Pierce back in his box. Unfortunately, the president is preoccupied with Mars, of course, so the senator can't guarantee a fast answer. He might be able to get joint jurisdiction as a stopgap. Sinclair's about to relax when Ivanova calls him to CNC because something's happening on Epsilon 3. Pierce is playing Explorer and trying to send ships down to the planet, but they're being repelled more violently than the B5 expeditions were. Sinclair flat out lies to Pierce, telling him they used a jammer to get through to the surface, which he didn't know about because he didn't consult with Sinclair before sending teams down. Sinclair says the jammer is being repaired with the aim of buying time to get control of Pierce. Unfortunately, he isn't the only issue. Epsilon 3 is now being rocked by artificially created and escalating earthquakes near its core. Ivanova estimates they have hours before the planet explodes, and in typical Russian fashion, states that the Hyperion can get out of the way, they can't, at which point it will most definitely be boom today for the station as a whole. Scans have now identified a huge network beneath the surface, incorporating immense fusion reactors that are heading towards critical. They have perhaps 48 hours, and they need at least double that to evacuate the 250,000 life forms on the station. Pierce is now even keener to get his teams on site. Ivanova's view is that would be suicide. The problem started when the landings were attempted, and she thinks it's a self-destruct mechanism to stop the now unmanned installation from falling into the wrong hands. When they went down, the failsafe didn't get triggered because someone was still just about in control, the alien in MedLab. Now you see, it's the little details about this series. There's a cleaner mopping the floor as Londo intercepts Ivanova to quiz her on what's going on. You see this quite a lot when you actually look for it. Guys doing maintenance and so on. The place quite literally does not run itself, which is very realistic. Ivanova's response to Londo's quiz? Boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom. His response? Fah! Elsewhere, Drol is with Delenn, and hears the alien's voice asking him for help again using his name. Elsewhere, Sinclair has heard about Garibaldi's failed career as a magician and wants to help but needs him sharp. Garibaldi just feels helpless. He can't help Lise, nor can he arrest Epsilon 3. He knows he shouldn't have gone off like he did, but he's desperate. When Sinclair asks why he didn't get in touch with Elise before now, it's simple. While he didn't know one way or the other, he could keep the hope alive. If she rejected him, he'd be crushed. If she didn't, he's not sure what he'd do about it. Schrodinger's cat. Sinclair will try and get him a clear channel using his contacts, and rather touchingly asks him for a favour. If they do have to evacuate, get Ivanova on a ship before him. Garibaldi chuckles and says he might have to drug her to do it, presumably in a B.A. Baracus style. Droll and Delenn arrive in Medbay where Franklin is with a patient. The patient comes around long enough to tell Droll that Ivanova has it right. If anyone lands on the planet, it will explode, unless it gets a new heart. Pierce is up to mischief again, still trying to get down to the planet, which has obviously been confirmed as a completely suicidal idea. Sinclair isn't playing nice this time and orders Delta and Zeta Wings to launch on a planetary blockade unless Pierce stands down. Whilst a career-ending move, Sinclair points out that if he lets him go down there, they're all dead, so it really won't matter. Both commanders take a step back. Things then get complicated further as a new ship comes through the gate and starts emitting a bright and seemingly powerful beam. It's just a scanner, but a powerful one hitting Babylon 5 and the Hyperion, pulling down language and translation files. Shortly afterwards, an alien similar to the one in Medbay appears on screen and says they've been looking for Epsilon 3 for 500 years. The comms beacon from Part 1 has brought them here. He looks pretty good for a 500-year-old. Unfortunately, he's rather determined to get hold of the planet and is going to start a shooting war if they don't get out in 10 hours. Not sure he's grasped the whole "it's a station, not a ship" thing. Just as Sinclair is about to open a channel back to him, Pierce jumps in and hilariously gives them 9 hours to get out themselves before he starts using deadly force. Ivanova wryly observes it's the worst case of testosterone poisoning she's ever seen. The alien from the machine says that this group are outcasts. It was not meant for them. It was put here to hide it from them. He is its guardian, but his people are gone. He says the machine is not for this time, and intriguingly he's been there for 500 years and watched as Babylon 5 was being built, listened, learned their language. Franklin says his poor condition is what's been causing the disturbances. As he dies, the planet dies with him, and the fail-safe is hastening its end. The alien's name is Varn. I think we've just learned that. Sinclair quizzes Delenn and Droll about their experience with him. Delenn asks Droll if he knew what Varn meant by another, and he says he does. He feels he was forbidden to ask him directly, but Droll knows what needs to be done. It was in Varn's eyes. Then Malari turns up, and the Minbari realise they must share what they know. In C&C, Sinclair grudgingly acknowledges that Pierce is right, and they're going to have to combine forces to combat Varn's outcasts. Malari and the Minbari discuss what needs to be done, with Delenn wondering why Varn only appeared to 3 of them. Londo gets it. Someone will not return from Epsilon 3. But he decides that it is better to act and take the risk, return to the wilder days of his youth once more. Ivanova clears a ship for launch, not realising it's got something other than evacuating itself in mind. It's Londo, in a rather fetching Purple Centauri shuttle, reenacting his adventures on Raleigh 12. Unfortunately, this is necessitated by the fact that Varn's people have opened fire on him, and are targeting the Hyperion as well. Their ship intriguingly starts separating into several independent units, as Star Furies are launched and moved to intercept. Boom today, after all. Exterior blast doors are closed on C&C's viewing portal, which is logical because it's a weak point after all. Londo's shuttle doesn't trigger the planet's defence systems to Ivanova's surprise. Clearly a residual link between Varn and the systems. Same probably won't be true for Mr. Garibaldi, however, who's taken it upon himself to take a shuttle after the first shuttle in order to bring Varn back. Clearly got tired of cooling his heels. As he dives for the surface, there's a nice shot of Hyperion's turreted weapons tracking and intercepting the alien craft's weapon fire. Londo's shuttle has got through unscathed, but rather disturbingly, he takes a while to remember where the landing thruster controls live. The Hyperion gets a couple of good shots in on the attacking craft as Garibaldi sets down. The ambassadorial group is already on its way to the system's control centre with Varn. Well, hey, they CGI'd Londo and the gang onto the walkway above the big vertical tunnel. It's not a composite shot, which I hadn't noticed before now. Star Furies and the defence grid are being used to fend off the attackers, While on S01E19, Garibaldi is surprised to discover the team who Vaughn has created a pocket of air for. He thought it was going to be tech thieves or something similar. That may explain why he chose to go down in such a hurry. Drall explains to Mr. Garibaldi that he lives to help others, but he had done all he could on Minbar. Here, now, he has an opportunity to fulfill his life's goals and continue to help others. This is what he was searching for. Babylon 5 takes a heavy hit, and it's being used as a shield by the attacking vessel, keeping the Hyperion from getting a clear shot. Another shot could cripple the forward area of the station, and they're powering up for another hit. Just then, there's a massive energy disturbance emitted from Epsilon 3, disrupting systems, and Drall appears as a hologram in CNC to lay down the law. Basically, the world belongs only to itself. If anyone were to get exclusive access to it, they would have too much power over the other races. Drall will entrust the security of the planet to the Babylon 5 Advisory Council and its enlightened self-interest, to ensure that it is left alone until the time is right. Drall also points out that the defensive systems of the planet are now fully operational, and will be used to repel or destroy any ship attempting to land before the time is right. He vanishes and systems come back online. The outcasts choose not to believe Drall's warning, and whilst their ships have held together pretty well up to this point, all three are essentially vaporised by the beam weapon Drall fires at them. As good as his word, and they were warned. On the surface, Delenn says her goodbyes. Vaughn will watch Drall for the time he has left, and reassures Delenn that the machine is a wonder, so that she can sleep at night while seeing Drall embedded in the web of machinery in her mind's eye. The machine will vastly extend his life, so he will see and hear many things, including thoughts, whilst he inhabits it. She bids Drall farewell as he proves the third principle of sentient life, the capacity for self-sacrifice. She hopes to see him again one day. On the station, a more subdued Pierce is pulling out for repairs, and grudgingly acknowledges that he's had a communication from the President, affirming Sinclair has priority in the sector, and he regrets that he may have overreached his authority. Sinclair accepts his apology almost graciously, but is clearly happy he's jumping out. Ivanova has got through to Mars, and Lisa's wounded, but okay. But the conversation doesn't go as Garibaldi would have hoped. She's glad to see him, and appreciates the effort he's put into trying to find her, but she's married. And expecting. And he'd already told her that he was hoping to get back together. Talk about a kick in the gut. You have to feel for him, and we've probably all been there, right? Paths not taken. Interestingly, we see him next with Delenn in the observation room where Shakar held the Jaquaneth ceremony, seeking quiet and contemplation. Garibaldi wonders why Delenn didn't involve Sinclair in the mission to the planet, and she says that if she had, she thinks he would now be on the planet in place of Drall. Not an unreasonable assessment, but she says that he has a destiny, so it could not be so. She acknowledges that she now owes Londo a great debt, which, being Centauri, he will one day come to collect, but that he also discovered something he thought was long buried, to which Garibaldi ruefully notes that some things are better left buried. He heads off, muttering about Lisa's husband being called Franz. Delenn hopes that Drall will sleep well. Well, excuse me, it's another humdinger of an episode. I'll get my tech fanboy bits out of the way and note that this is the first episode to heavily feature an Earth capital ship. From memory, the Hyperion class has nothing in the way of artificial gravity. Earth doesn't have that tech. It carries a few fighters and ancillary craft, although I wouldn't like to swear how many, but the scanner readout on the station did suggest around half a dozen vehicles getting battered by the planet's automated defences. As I mentioned, it carries a heavier version of the usual Star Fury we see, probably because its launch system is different to Babylon 5's. With a rear cockpit, I don't think that type could be held by the Cobra Bay launch arms, but feel free to debate that one. Nice that they thought to differentiate them, though, in any event. I think we have to assume that the Hyperion as a military vessel of reasonable size can form its own jump points, but opted not to here. Nice twin cannon turrets used in both offensive and defensive fashion suggests that whatever is being fired by the enemy isn't travelling at anywhere near light speed, otherwise you couldn't react fast enough to track and destroy it at the limited ranges the engagement happens in this episode. The enemy ship here is pretty hardcore, given it's handling fire from Babylon 5's defence grid, multiple Star Furies, and the Hyperion, although we never really see their crew giving us any detail about how much damage they may actually be taking. I was surprised to see Babylon 5 actually takes a hit in this episode, but what that does demonstrate is that defence grid or not, it's one great big sitting duck when all's said and done, and there are no shields in this universe. You get shot, and there are a vast number of civilians on board, so it's high stakes, and you appreciate why Sinclair was at loggerheads with Pierce for much of this episode. Now ask me why Londo has access to a very fetching Centauri shuttle. Nope, I haven't got a clue either. I'd sort of buy it being his personal transport, but I don't see why he'd have an atmosphere-capable ship. If it were his, you'd think he'd remember where the landing thrusters were. I guess it's possible he just commandeered it by pulling Centauri rank. Anyway, again, another new CGI model, I think, for this episode, but it just went to show the versatility this introduced in terms of the use of CGI, because it was new then, and it's a fun way to distinguish who's who, of course. The alien ship was an interesting threat, having a multi-vector attack mode, well before Starfleet ever did. Very tough, but fundamentally stupid of them to go head-to-head with Epsilon 3 if they had even half a clue about just how much power was down there. And they were right overhead. It's not like they were making it hard for Drall to pick them off. A useful indication, however, that he was categorically not kidding about protecting the place and had grasped how to operate it very rapidly. So, effects bonanza aside, what else do we get here? The origins of the installation are not particularly clear. I think I remember posting on Newsgroup about this at the time, actually. And as good as Vaughn's race's ship tech seems to be, they weren't using beam weapons. So I think the assumption is that someone called out to Vaughn's race to take over custody of it and keep it safe, like Vaughn did with Drall. You wonder just how long Vaughn had been holding on for. Presumably, had Drall not been around, he might have just appeared to Londo and Sinclair. This is clearly a nice resolution for Drall, as he has found purpose once more, and there's the possibility that he and Delenn will still be able to communicate with one another in some way. Garibaldi's arc is not easy for him. He's wound up like a spring all episode with a combination of uncertainty and helplessness, and he is demonstrably struggling to keep his emotions in check. We know this can be a problem for him, and again we see Sinclair trying to help him stay on the right path. We again see Sinclair trying to use his political contacts as a tool to find the best solution for a difficult situation, but of course time and timings are not on his side here, even if that option does resolve itself, as Pierce's "things we learned today" moment at the end of the episode shows. So, he gets his comeuppance. We also see that Sinclair is prepared to put his career on the line in order to safeguard those under his protection. That's a very interesting moment in terms of chain of command too, I think, but Ivanova clearly has his back, just as he wanted to protect her if they did have to evacuate. There's a lot of mutual respect and trust there, as we know. Londo gets to do his maverick thing, with Ivanova admiring his evasive and clearly bonkers flying style, not a skill set we really knew he had up until this point. Nor would I really have expected him to have put himself on the line for 2 Minbari, but I think ultimately his curiosity as much as anything else got the better of him, plus he now has a Minbari favour in the bank. Delenn obviously has to let go of Drall to some extent, but I think is happy that he's found his place in the universe, which is what it was he was seeking in coming to Babylon 5 in the first place. So that's a good resolution for him, I think, and I do like the nature of his character. Ivanova is more station-bound in this episode than in the first part, but she still gets some cracking lines to play with and some great comedy moments as a result. Very good teamwork with her and Sinclair as well. So ultimately, we're left in a position where Drall has taken over as Guardian of Epsilon 3, which clearly has more to it than we've seen based on what Vaughn indicates to Delenn in terms of its abilities. And yet, as intriguing as it is, we have no idea under what conditions Drall may decide to make it available to anyone again. We just know that the station has been built in orbit of a seemingly dead world, which in fact houses a massively powerful artifact that has a rather harsh hands-off policy. Given that this two-parter, and I think it was an eminently successful two-parter, was an arc episode in its entirety, this is unlikely to be the last we see of the inside of Epsilon 3. And somewhat ironically for the analogy I noted for part 1, Epsilon 3 actually is the Forbidden Planet at this point. So, not long to go in Season 1 now. Well, I shall try and keep the momentum up. Thanks for listening. Oh, and welcome to the White House, President Biden.